Hello and welcome to another Atomic AX Instructopod. Today we're going to talk about how to set up a 2012 R3 or later development environment from scratch. So I've already started clicking through a few screens. These are the basic things you need to set up and agree to in order to run the installer. This particular package has AX 2012 R3 with the CU12 package slipstreamed into the installer. So we've clicked through and accepted the EULA, and it will be installing a few updates. This will be installing everything that is required to get the setup started. That doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be any other items to install later, but this will just get us to the initial feature selection screen where we can select everything that we're going to want to have set up for this development instance. So once this finishes, and it should just be just a moment, this will take us to the feature selection screen where we can pick everything that we're going to want. So we're going to select Dynamics AX, custom installation, just so we can select the components that we want. And we're going to want database, AOS, reporting services, analysis services. We'll get to that later on. All of the client configuration options, the debugger, the trace parser, Visual Studio 2010 tools, all the DIXF components, and management utilities. And then we'll go ahead and click Next. So once we click Next, it'll take us to the prerequisite validation screen. And it'll let us know everything that we selected, whether or not we have the prerequisites for that. Depending on which features you select, the screen may look a little bit different. So we're missing a few prerequisites. There are two that you're almost always going to have to download directly from Microsoft. They'll show up in the prerequisite checklist. You'll get a link. You can go and download that, install it, and then click reevaluate, and that'll remove it from the list. Everything else in the list, when we get there, is packaged with the ISO. So we can just click on the configure checkbox and click the configure button, and it'll just automatically configure it for us. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I'll click all the configure checkboxes. Click the configure button, and it will go through and install all of the other stuff that was packaged with the 2012 install media that's required to get this AOS or this development instance up and running. Just as a quick call out, so this VM is hosted in Azure, and I actually allocated it as, I believe, a DS5. So it has a fair amount of hardware. Depending on what hardware is provisioned to your machine, this may take a few minutes. In this instance, I believe it was less than 20 seconds as a single shot. This is highly dependent on how much hardware your machine is given. Next, we're going to install the prerequisites that were not packaged with the installer media. In this instance, it's MS Chart. We downloaded that earlier, so we're just going to go ahead and install it and then click Revalidate. Now that we've clicked Revalidate, we don't have any critical stops here, so we can just go ahead and click Next. Next, we're going to create databases. Here is where we'd want to use the standard name for a development instance. I typically use like AX 2012 Dev or something similar. And then we'll need to rename our baseline database as well if we're going to be using that. Now that we've specified database names, we can go ahead and click Next. So this process is going to scan for and find available data packages to install into our databases. This will typically be Foundation. I typically select Foundation labels. And if we were doing an upgrade, we would select Foundation Upgrade also. So now that we have Foundation labels selected, we can go ahead and click Next. Here we would specify our instance name as long as some ports for our AOS. Since this is going to be one AOS on this one machine, we can go ahead and select the defaults. On this screen, we're going to specify the domain account that we want the AOS to run under. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video to get some of that info copy and pasted in there. All right, there we go. On the next screen, we'll be specifying the installation type. We're going to want to select developer and then throw a shortcut onto our desktop. On the screen, we're going to specify the domain account that we want the business connector to run under. Next, we're going to specify where we want SQL reports to be deployed. By default, we do not want to deploy the reports just yet. We'll cover that in a little bit. Next, we're going to fill in some data import-export framework parameters. And then again, we're going to have another prerequisite validation screen. So we have a prerequisite that we need to install. Again, this provides us with a link. We can go ahead and download and install it. If you have SSMS 2012 installed, you probably won't get this error, but by default, that's not installed on a Windows 2016 VM in Azure. So now that that's installed, we're going to go ahead and click Configure and then Configure again. So once this is done, we shouldn't have any critical errors, so we can go ahead and click Next and then click Install. I'm going to speed up the video for that part and also add some metal, so enjoy. So for some reason I don't understand, it pauses the install right here until you click the Yes button. So go ahead and click Yes. And there you have it. You'll be able to fire up the client. You'll have some more steps to do to fully set this up. But that's the install process from start to finish. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks. See you next time.